Thank you. How beautiful. Are you feeling your heart go deeper? Yes. Say it like you mean it.
Yes.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
This is the fourth in a series of 6 talks based on the book What's in the Way is the Way by Mary O'Malley. And oh, by the way, for those of you who are going to be seeing Greater Tuna this afternoon, we have one of the stars of the show right here in our sanctuary right now. Where are you, Dennis? Stand up. The Reverend Dennis Ashley. Come on, stand up. Dennis, a long-time member of this church before going off and blessing his own congregation with all of his wisdom. We're glad you're here. So to recap our journey so far, we have talked about the meadow, a field of peace and well-being that lives within us always, that has 5 qualities to it: flow, spaciousness, stillness, light, and love. And if we're not experiencing life from this meadow of well-being, it's because of the chattering of the storyteller. That voice, the inner dialogue that's going on, that's narrating whatever's happening, and covering up the true reality within us. The storyteller is fueled by fear, as well as limiting beliefs that the author refers to as spells, since they are imposed upon us at a young age, and also we can come out from its effect. We can let go of that spell. And the most foundational spell is one of a belief that we're separate, belief in separation, belief that we're alone, that we're unsafe. My talk title this morning is Experiencing Life, and we're talking about life with a capital L here. And we'll be talking about seeing through the spells, getting to know the stories that we have been listening to, and awakening to the joy of being fully alive, of really connecting with that aliveness within us. And to reconnect with life, we need to see what's blocking it. What within us is blocking that connection? And this all comes down to awakening. This is about awakening to when we are under the spell of the storyteller's spin and becoming compassionately curious about that spell, because we've been unconsciously operating from it in many ways. And the only power that these spells have over us comes from an unwillingness to look at them. As we see these spells, we see through the spells. And in that moment, we can bring our attention back to the joy of the present moment that's always at present, ever present, always. But we have to be willing to look at what's blocking it. And the reason we can do that is because at the core of our being, we are pure awareness. Pure awareness. That awareness that can watch our thoughts and our sensations instead of reacting to them, you see. But we've identified for so long with those thoughts and sensations. And when we react to them, we can resist them, fight them, run away from them, or try to hold on to them, try to control our experience. Do you recognize any of these behaviors? Denying, resisting, manipulating, fixing, wanting our life to be different, that just perpetuates more of what we don't want. So we can learn to become curious about that. Become curious about life instead of trying to control life. And the more we become curious about what's going on right now, rather than trying to change things out there, the more we will get to know our clouds of struggle, as Mary O'Malley calls them, and the more those clouds will thin out. You see? So the first step to awakening is to recognize that we've been engaged in unconscious behavior. That's a big step, to really see that. And then to be willing to see what's underlying that, to make a different choice. The author suggests asking ourselves this question: has this approach of constantly trying to get to the good stuff or get rid of the bad stuff ever brought me lasting peace? It's a good question to ask, isn't it? And if what we're doing isn't working, then we need to find a better way. And one of the issues, of course, as we've heard, is that the storyteller is fueled by fear. So it can be scary to do this work. It can be scary to look at what we have been avoiding or repressing or denying for decades. We can experience some anxiety as we go through this, or a sense of shame or unease. We can worry that people will judge us, that they might even uncover an addiction to approval. Ooh. And that is exactly why it is necessary to do this work with a very healthy dose of self-compassion. It's the linchpin that can help us do this stuff because it makes it safe to look at this stuff. I mean, nobody likes looking at their stuff. Anybody here like looking at your stuff? No. Not at all. But here's the thing, when we can do it with compassion, when we can look with compassion at the frightened storyteller within, we'll see that our suffering comes from buying into its stories and its fears, its beliefs. They're like mirages that we have been conditioned to be afraid of. And all of that arises because we've given our minds a task that it's not designed for. You know, the mind is very helpful for maneuvering through life in the sensory world. It's an interpretive organ that interprets what's going on around us. But it's not supposed to be in charge. Giving our mind the task of being in charge of our life, it's like giving a child keys to the car. Where you go. And the author writes this, putting your mind in charge of your life has twisted it into knots of neuroses. And when you see this, you can see why we're such a depressed, disconnected, addicted society. Can you see this? And it's all a consequence of the disconnect from who we truly are. All of it. It all arises from that. So in order to experience the joy of life, we need to become aware of when we're under the spell of this egoic spin of the mind. And then shift to using the gifts of the mind to become curious about life rather than trying to control life. We don't need to control life. Let's all take a nice deep breath and a sigh of relief. Thank goodness. Can we even control life? No. But curiosity is the avenue. Mary O'Malley calls it the opposite of fixing. And she writes that curiosity can tease our attention out of the problem factory of the mind so that we can see the experience with new eyes and become honest about our inner state. Ask a question of life itself. And then, instead of trying to figure it out, allow life to answer it through us. That was our homework from last week, if you remember. And as we watch and listen for life's answer, we want to notice what's really going on, relating to what we're experiencing rather than from what we're experiencing. We change it from subjective to objective, from believing this is who we are to seeing it, and relating to it with compassion and kindness. That's a point of power when we can do that. And when we're identified with the spells that make up our clouds, we tighten up, we constrict. Our body, our heart, our mind, everything tightens up, dimming the free-flowing aliveness that we are, stopping the flow. And so we need to become tightness detectives. Instead of being upset about what's going on inside of us, we become curious. Our body is communicating its wisdom to us all the time. The spells express themselves as patterns of holding in the body, and every single feeling you have is expressed in your body in a particular way. And your body will signal you long before your mind will that you're reacting to something. So we want to pay attention and listen. Our discomforts are not there because there's something wrong. They're here as our guide through the clouds of struggle back into the meadow, So becoming a tightness detective helps us to zero in on where we're pushing things away, where we're resisting life, where we're trying to fix things. See, it shows us that we're doing that. And then instead of trying to fix the discomfort, we use compassionate curiosity to see what the message is. What's the body trying to tell me right now? And then we don't run away from the message. We just listen. Compassion's the key for this. We have to be in a place of compassion as we're doing this. We have to be mindful of this, because here's why. Resistance and contraction are going to show up. We've learned those defensive coping strategies very well. We've spent most of our lives resisting our immediate experience. I'll speak for myself. I have done that. But look in your own life. Is that something that you've noticed, that there's a resistance? And typically when we get triggered in some way, we react. Maybe by blaming or fixing or projecting or running away. And because of those ingrained behaviors, the coping strategies we've learned, the underlying fear never gets addressed, you see. It never comes out in the open to see what it really is. But do we really want our reactions running our lives? Look around the world today. Are you seeing any evidence that reactivity is the norm? And I don't know about you, but I'm so done with that. I'm so ready for a kinder, more compassionate world to come forth. Are you with me?
Yes.
But we have to begin here. We have to begin working with our own reactivity in order to become clear channels for divine love to be manifest on this earth. As long as there's stuff getting in the way, it'll keep getting in the way. The issue, of course, is that the mind is afraid of looking. So it'll do all sorts of things to distract us from being curious. It's a masterful denial and distraction machine. It's been doing it for a long time. We took on the unconsciousness of our parents and our families and our friends at early childhood. It's part of being human. It's just part of what happens when we get here. And we've been conditioned to believe that if we don't look at these uncomfortable or unacceptable parts of ourselves, that they will go away. Do they? No, they do not. They become orphaned. And as long as we avoid looking at them, they stay that way. And they cause way more trouble when they're under the surface than they do when we bring them out into the light of day. Carl Jung calls them hungry dogs in the basement. They just get louder the longer we ignore them. And so we can begin this process of healing them through something the author refers to as a U-turn. And the U-turn is bringing your attention back to you so that you can recognize that the stories, the sensations, the feelings that are asking for attention are doing so in order to be let go of. You see? And as you turn your attention toward yourself, you're not trying to fix anything, you're not trying to make anything happen. All you're doing is being curious about your immediate experience. And when you do, your full attention, when you give yourself full attention with self-compassion, those orphaned parts get the spaciousness they need in order to expand and integrate. They're welcomed back into the fold. You see? We'll talk more about that next week. But it feeds the hungry dogs. Compassion is what feeds the hungry dogs. And it's healthy food. So I had an experience this week of getting an opportunity to put this into practice. It seems like every week, no matter what I'm talking about, I get the opportunity. The universe is very forthcoming in that way. And it happened while I was watching the news. Some of you might remember I had the breaking news blues a few weeks back. And so I was watching someone on the news, and I noticed my tightness detective showed up. Noticed I was contracting, I was resisting, I was blaming, and I realized that I had made someone the enemy in my mind. I had believed they were against me, and I had projected on them. Not only that, but most importantly, I had shut this person out of my heart. See? And in that aha moment of catching myself, I saw so clearly what a damaging thing it is to wall off your heart from anyone. Damaging in the sense of creating a blockage to experiencing the oneness of the divine. Damaging to the flow of divine love into the world. And as I caught myself, I realized I had to stop doing that. If I'm really putting these principles into practice, then even with the news, it has to work. And so I realized I had to lower that wall, and I had to welcome this person into my heart. I did not want to. It took a minute for the willingness to arise. When I say minute, 20 minutes. But I got there. Once I got the willingness, then I allowed that to happen, because while not condoning or accepting the behavior that had triggered me, I welcomed their divine essence into my heart. Do you see? I took time to really create a welcoming field of kindness, gratitude, and compassion, and once I did, I invited them to enter. And in the course of doing this, I slowly watched how this person turned in my mind from an enemy to an ally. I actually got there. And I saw the gift that they were bringing to me. I was able to imagine this person had lovingly shown up to mirror one of my beliefs to me so that I could be no longer under its spell. I could be free of it. And I felt immense gratitude. And with the integration that happened, I have to tell you, I felt such a surge of joyous relief. It was amazing. And I realized how wonderful it was to be free of the burden of hardening my heart toward a fellow human being. And it took some work, but I have to tell you that I experienced firsthand what it feels like to have a blockage to the flow be released, to feel the divine connection open up, to be filled with the peace of spirit and the joy of living. And since I've done this exercise, I have truly been feeling the joy of living to a much greater extent than I ever did before. It takes a huge amount of energy to keep someone walled off in your heart. And to be clear, this practice is not only for people who show up on the news. Search your own heart and find where there may be a stuck place within you. Maybe it's someone from your past. You know that person. Maybe someone who's a thorn in your side right now. Maybe someone you've written off. All right, you're out of my life. And just practice this and see what happens. Now, to be clear, you don't have to become best friends with this person. You don't have to start hanging around with them. I won't be inviting this person over for dinner anytime soon. But if you can clear up the field of compassion, of all obstructions, lower the wall, welcome their essence into your heart, you can heal that relationship. You can free up the energy that's been bound up from resisting and pushing away and condemning and ridiculing and judging and keeping them out of your heart. It was astounding to me how much more energy I had. Because the thing to remember is this: life is set up to bring up what's been bound up so it can open up to be freed up so you can show up in life. In other words, what's in the way is the way. If we're willing to really look without judgment at the spells and the stories we make up, this can fuel our awakening. That's why life is always trustable, not always likable, as she says. Trustable. Any experience that our tightness detective discovers can point us in the direction of healing. So whatever the triggering situation is, it has the potential to show us something of value. It shines a light on what's hidden within us. And then we can give it whatever it is, compassion, curious compassion to help it relax, release, integrate, heal. And when that happens, we now have the opportunity to experience life in all its fullness from our wholeness, without constriction. Roy Eugene Davis was a spiritual teacher and a longtime student of Paramahansa Yogananda, who is one of my personal teachers in life. And he said this: "It should be remembered that at our innermost level of being or essence, we're always serene, pure, free, aware of ultimate reality, of which we are units of its pure essence." He's describing the meadow within and how we're all connected to that deeper source. And he goes on to say, when we overly identify with what we are not, in this case the storyteller, we're inclined to be oblivious of what we are, oblivious of what we are. In other words, the meadow is always present, and we don't know it because we're identified with the child-made egoic self. These teachings aren't new. They're not exclusive to Mary O'Malley's understanding. In fact, they are spiritual principles that are universal. Our job is to take these principles from theory to actualization. That's the work. That's the work that can help with the emergence of a new paradigm of living, a new morphogenic field of compassion becoming the norm. That's how we do it. The Q process is designed to help with this because it helps to transform unconsciousness into consciousness in order to unhook from these foundational spells. And the more we get to know the storyteller using compassionate curiosity, the more those spells just pass through us. They no longer hold a charge. She calls this noticing, which means the art of using your attention to notice what's happening without trying to make anything happen or trying to fix or change anything. Along with being a tightness detective, noticing what is happening in our bodies, we also want to awaken to the various areas of our own personal life that cause us to be triggered. What is that for you? She identifies some of these areas. She calls them the 5 great teachers. See if any of these resonate with you. The first is compulsions. Pay attention to things like addictive-driven behaviors. I heard a new phrase this week, action addiction. I went, oh, that's me. Sorry, I'm addicted to action, gotta go. Busyness, right? Just notice when you're engaged in any form of compulsive, addictive, or driven behavior, and just stop and realize that this behavior is really a false refuge. You see? And ask yourself, what am I trying to get away from here? What am I trying to avoid? So compulsions, illness in the body or imbalance of some kind. Pain, whether it's physical or emotional, can help us to discover a much deeper realization of who we are. Financial issues, relationship challenges. All of these things have great potential to help us uncover hidden beliefs. And I don't think she's saying this is the only way there is to learn, just that these teachers are ripe with potential to do our healing work if we use them to awaken. And what I take from that is that whatever area of your life seems to be against you, that's the very place where the gold lies. And yeah, I hate that too. But she says, what if the treasures of life that you long for are hidden within the places that you see as uncomfortable? See? What if they actually fuel our awakening? What if we have to go into that dark cave to find it? Now's the time for us to stop fighting with the difficulties and the discomforts of life and learn to explore them, understanding that discomfort is a doorway. So ask yourself, what's the storyteller telling you right now? Is there any tightening in your body? Become tightness detectives. What's showing up for you right now? Pay attention to the stories that are going on because they're here to show us something, but realize that suffering comes from believing them and from resisting our current experience. And if the stories are telling you that this is too hard, or it's not true, or you don't need to listen, then notice that. Notice any resistance you might have to this whole thought. Explore the struggle, but do it with compassionate curiosity, kindfulness, one of my new favorite words, and bring forth the healing with divine love. Because every one of us is here to make a difference in our world. And when we get to seeing that spiritual evolution does not come about by fixing ourselves or improving our flawed selves in some way, but it's simply freeing our minds in order to become clear vehicles for the divine to manifest, that is when we can change and transform our world. We're all empowered to create something new because we're all recreating ourselves all the time. We're always creating our experience of life. And so we have the choice of what we are creating. Do not underestimate the power within you to make change. As Gandhi said, the pure love of one soul can offset the hatred of millions. Oops, wrong way on that one. There you go. And that one soul could be you. The Course in Miracles tells us the holiest spot on earth is where an ancient hatred becomes a present love. It's one of my favorite lines from Course in Miracles of all times. But that holy spot is within our hearts. Do you see it? After the news was over, I felt the holiness that was going on inside my heart. And when each one of us does this inner work, we begin to create a field of compassion that can change the world. Are you up for that?
Yes.
Well, as you do so this week, here are some discussion questions to explore, either with your small group that you might be in or on your own. What does it mean to you to be a tightness detective? So if you use your body as a spell detector, what kind of feelings, what kind of sensations would be the indicator for you that you're reacting in some way, that you're under a spell? You know, do you get a tightness in the stomach? Do you shallow breathing? What it is, get to know your triggering points, what happens to your body, and start paying attention when they show up. What's one area in your life you experience resistance? And as you think about that, what spell do you think might underlie that situation? Compassionate curiosity. Describe a time you did a U-turn. I described one for you today. A time when you maybe caught yourself projecting and stopped and turned your attention back within and noticed what was going on inside of you. If you don't have an example, make it a practice to try that this week. And what's your understanding of the idea that discomfort can be a guide back to reality? What area of your life could be the richest source of this discomfort? What is the great teacher in your life? And how can you utilize the potential within it to evolve? Byron Katie said, self-actualization is not complete until it lives in action. And I would argue it may never be complete, but this is the path to it. This is the path to self-actualization. This is the work. This is how we put our unity principles into practice and truly show up to experience life. Because, say it with me, life is set up to bring up what's been bound up so it can open up to be freed up so we can show up for life. And so it is.